Welcome to Stories of Facilitating Software Design and Architecture. Today, we're here with Diana Montalion and also with my usual co-conspirator, Kenny. And so, Diana, please take it away with your story.
Okay, so first of all, I love this format because one of the things I'll say that's not inherent in my story is that storytelling is one of the most powerful ways to help an organization see a situation differently. And I just used it again. I wrote a Christmas story in my current role that to try and just show that I was hearing what people were saying and needing. And it landed with so many more people than an architecture model would have. So I like that it's very meta that you've made this a story inside the experience because they both matter. So I guess the story that stands when you asked this, the thing that came screaming to mind is one of my, I'll say habits, not maybe the best habit, is that when people are confused or uncertain, or when I don't really think they're hearing, I'm trying to facilitate change and I feel like there's a lot of resistance, I explain more. I think that what people need is more words, they need more. And after 20 years, it was just exhausting. And also it felt like Sisyphus, I kept pushing the same rock up the hill and it would roll back down and roll me over and splat. And I'd be a bug juice and that's it. And why am I doing this? So I live near a place where they do like yoga, massage, stuff like that. And it's nice sometimes to take a drive for an hour and go there and stay there for the day or stay there overnight. I was there just kind of resting from a lot of work. And I was in a little workshop-y thing. And the facilitator said, "Oh yeah, you're not here to think. Like just you quiet your brain. You're just here to experience." I'm like, "No, I'm never, no, I'm never, I don't know how, I don't have a button. If there's a button, let me know, but I don't know where it is." But what I also noticed is that I was having these experiences and it was predominantly people who appear to be or identify female and a few guys, like people's partners go or individual guys, but that I work for 25 plus years in an environment exactly the opposite. You know, for the first 10 or 15 years, I was often the only female in the room. And simultaneously, when people develop workshops or ways of learning at Kripalu is the name of the place there, it's very experiential. You're always experiencing something, moving through something. And in my day job, in my usual life, in my system science and software architect life, we don't have bodies really. We we just talk to each other, right? And we write code. Like it was. I just noticed how far apart these experiences were. Simultaneously, I had proposed a talk for Domain-Driven Design Europe, and I had said, I'd really like this to be a workshop. I think it would be a much better workshop. And when I went back to my room after having this enlightenment moment, literally the organizer of Domain-Driven Design had pinged me while I was having this realization and said, "Hey, you said this talk could be a workshop. What would you do? What would you do?" And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm being asked the question to actualize this in like, I'm not just realizing this. What would I do? And it's a place where I tended to take risks anyway. What I and my training partner decided to do is we offered a workshop on understanding systems using the iceberg model, right? The mental models the structures and patterns that generate events in the system. We tend to focus on the events. There's a bug in production, but not the fact that every system is designed to get the results it gets. The call is coming from inside the house. And because of I usually work on deep digital change with organizations and architecting that, we have to be able to see how we are generating outcomes we don't want and how do we generate the ones we do. And I'd really struggled with how to do that. And so we used the iceberg model, and we didn't call it this, but to model the patriarchy, meaning in 2022, there's a study that there are 92% of software developers worldwide are male, but actually it's 91.88%, so not quite that bad. And if I had done a workshop to say, let's talk about gender equality, first of all, who would have signed up for it? And secondly, people would bring all their frames, I would too. I would have ideas about that. It didn't do that. Instead, for the first half, we took the iceberg model, the mental model, structures and patterns, and said, okay, we're going to work in groups and we're going to model a system that generates that outcome. We want to end up visibly 92% male. That's what we want. And so we made stickies and all the teams worked together and did that. And then we said, okay, so let's flip it. We want to design a system where you can't tell if someone's a software engineer by looking at them. It looks just like the general population. I've since done that 4 times, this workshop 4 or 5 times. I learn so much every time I do it. And people come up with all kinds of things that I never even thought of before. And people have been very willing to engage in it because it's experiential, because we're having an experience. I'm not telling people what to think. I'm asking people to think together about how something works and how it might work differently. So to summarize now, the reason this really stayed with me, or the reason this idea came, is that I'm in a role now where I am with an organization that I really like and I really respect, and I really like the role that I'm doing. And part of that is getting from a very CRUD-based system and also practices to a system that can generate intelligence, has temporal intelligence, all the things we think of with the system. And it's only been a few months, but I see myself making the same mistake of if people don't really understand, I say more, I make more model, I say more. This does not help. Also, when people are resisting, they'll resist forever because they can find infinite ways I'm wrong, or they don't know whether I'm doing the right thing. And I'm so much faster at just instead designing an experience. Let's just try it. Let's do this. Let's just try it. And I have seen, I would say, architectural miracles in the last few months, or people who were very resistant to a particular change for reasons, but then they have an experience of it and they think it through for themselves. And then they go, wow, here are all the things I can do with this. And they pick up the ball and run with it. Now, that doesn't have to happen, but it's a win if people have the experience and then say, this isn't going to work, Diana, and here are the reasons why. That's great. Being wrong I want to be wrong before I cost a whole bunch of time, energy, attention, and money banking on that, right? I want that. And so this facilitation leadership, as I've come to think of it, that this type of leadership is facilitation, and that facilitation is a type of leadership that can be more effective, more impactful, and generate more power in the sense of you have more impact. You have more positive impact. The legacy of the work benefits people for longer and wider but it's tricky to find because it doesn't look like it's supposed to look, and you're more vulnerable. Like, it leaves you in an unprotected space, and you don't know how people are going to react. And that I think is good for you to have a bit of your feet on the ground when you try and do that. Like, it's trickier in the beginning of a career to do that than it is later on, but you can always partner with people who are doing it. And that's another thing, I guess, right? Is pairing up, doing it together, designing experiences. But yeah, so facilitate experiences, especially if you feel like you think you should explain more.
Yeah. So recognizable. It reminds me a little bit of this. I talk about it some more, but it reminds me of the Corporate Tribe book of two anthropologists in the Netherlands. It has nothing to do in IT, but they say the same. They have this role called the shaman who creates experience or magic, right? Whenever you're in such a workshop, and I think also Eric Evans mentioned, right, the breakthrough. And I think that's what you just mentioned. But what struck me is it's very uncertain. You're in an uncertain situation. How do you deal with that uncertainty? Because I think that's what that scares me still to this day the most, stepping into that.
Yeah, I love that. Also, that it's interesting you say that about shaman or a tradition, right? Is that one of the questions that occurred to me around that time is like, what if at the core what our goal is wisdom? Like, knowledge work, wouldn't it be ideal if knowledge work generates wisdom? And so this question of what is it to be a wisdom teacher in this particular time of history, and the facilitation aspect is part of what came to me as well. Like that, I'm not sure I have much to say about it, but that points in this direction. I feel like if you have that. So uncertainty. Oh, it's funny because I was on a panel and one of the other speakers was talking about the problem with uncertainty and, complexity and, and how you do. And I don't get it. There is only uncertainty. That's all there is. Everything else is delusion. We're telling ourselves, we're making that up, right? Like complexity, uncertainty, this is the nature of everything. And so I think it's trying to discern the difference between when you're trying to control that reality and you can't because you really don't know what will happen as a result. And when you are trying to act well inside of uncertainty and complexity. Like, it's not like, oh, we're uncertain, but let's just leap off and see what happens. Like, you're not architecting if you're doing that. But concept on the other side is also not, for me anyway, my work is often not going all the way to validating a need for certainty, because I legitimately I can't facilitate us there. I feel like the best thing we can become certain of is this is the best possible idea, action, recommendation, direction that we could come up with right now. And for me, that's enough. Like, if we're like, there's like a 70% chance this is a good direction, that's good. And this is the best we could come up with right now. Yay.
She always says architecture is very easy if you have insight in the future, right? And but it also reminds me a little
machine.
Yeah. What before we go to you, Andre, it always reminds me what you're saying about controlling the uncertainty. It's like the first Avenger movie. You had the Hulk turning, or Bruce Banner turning into the Hulk, and they ask him, "How do you control not being angry?" He says, I'm always angry. And I think that's what you're explaining, right? I'm always in uncertainty, so I don't need to control it. Then I can let it go.
Yeah,
Great to know that Diana is the Hulk. I mean, it's like an interesting way to find out, but cool.
I know him from work. What's the line from Thor Ragnarok? There's a friend from work.
Yeah. Friend from work. Yeah.
It's a friend from work.
What you call it? I kind of was thinking, Definitely. I think uncertainty, some organizations want to definitely have the ideas that they are managing it. So actually, my question to you is like, how do you think people can get to like, because I understand how you can, like, for example, I do stuff my way and Kenny does stuff the way, but I think it's hard to kind of try to think what is the pattern that is good so that we can help organizations understand the fact that uncertainty is a fact of life. And that would be one question. And the second one is, I think if you talk to some people inside orgs and you say, hey, let's do an experience, they will like, what? They will want some certainty of what they will get out of the workshop. And sometimes I say something like, you will learn something. Um, so can you talk about those kind of two areas when it comes
Yeah,
to
and
running this type of experiences?
they go together. And first, I think they want to say, because they know this is this comes up this comes up a lot, especially when I do workshops, and it's like, you cannot lead a horse to water and you cannot make them drink. Like, if somebody's like, no, and we want this and we need this and we're not going to take a risk and all of that, I personally don't know what to do in that, like, because it involves consent, right? All facilitation involves consent. That's the difference between facilitation and command and control, right? And I can get a smaller bit of consent. I can ask for consent for something that the person is willing to consent to, but you can't do it trick or what. I mean, you can, but it's counterproductive. So part of my answer to that is, if the organization is like, I need to know like what the core deliverables are and what we get and what's the measurable metric for do this experimented all the time, I don't know that I could necessarily be effectively experiment in that environment. I could try, but a little bit of willingness, I think, is part of it's the doorway, but a little bit. So for me, where I focus is not to have these conversations, because no, I mean, in tech, I could have philosophical conversations all day, but no one wants to philosophical conversations with me. And it's also not really what my point is. Instead, I focus on what the organization most wants. So in my current situation, for example, when I listen to product, strategizing vision and really understanding the people that we serve, there are things that are really clearly keep coming up for them, right? So the thing is, nobody knows how. I don't know how to concretely describe exactly what we would make in tech to give them the thing they want. They're not even sure that they understand completely exactly how users will do things, exactly what it is they want. There is inherent uncertainty, but there's also a tremendous desire to find out, because they've identified this as really important. So within that, I try to structure to describe what it is we know. What is it that we're really comfortable with? And what are like, if I'm going to make a recommendation, what convinced me? What do we know? What data do we have? What certainty do we have to back up the encouragement to take one step? So we know this, we know that, this is really valuable, and we want to take this stretch. And then, so what could we try? What's the experience? What do we not know? And how would here's what I would suggest how we find out. And the deliverable is valuable knowledge, valuable information. You want to go in this direction, but we're not entirely sure how. I can come back and give you something concrete that doesn't totally answer it, but it does give you something you need, some information you need to move forward. Most of the time, I can make something happen inside of that space. Outside of that space, people have to already understand the value of these approaches, or it'll just be an endless debate. So picking an area where there is already acknowledgement of complexity and not promising to solve a problem, but instead promising to deliver important insight, that to be the most successful. Hard part is I don't know what to do. I have to make up an experience and I have to know what might help. That's not easy. So I guess I think I want to end with this idea that we think for most of my career, the hardest part has been this. How do you get an organization, or how do you lead a horse to water? How do you do this? But I'm at the place in my career now and with the organization I'm in where it's actually the work that's the hardest. Like when there isn't friction, when you can facilitate, you discover that facilitative leadership is way harder than just telling people what to do, because you're uncertain too. You're experimenting too, right? You're vulnerable right along with them. And I think but that's where we really grow our skill set, is when we really have to take a risk and figure out what's the one thing we could do that would give us more confidence in a situation where there's 1,000 things we could do. It's hard.
I think you said something interesting, because I was at your session at DDD Europe, by the way. And
Yeah, you were.
afterwards, I used the iceberg in my company.
You said safe, though. You said the solution to the 91% is safe. That would fix it.
I made it. Oh, yeah. That was a joke. But I went to the company with someone else where I'm currently still in, and I started mapping this. And you said something very interesting, because you saw a pattern arising just by modeling it out for yourself. I'm not sure if you did that, but I did that.
Yeah.
And I saw the same thing happening. And it reminded me of DDD language. And what you can get out of that is use their language, use what they already know, use what's repetitive. And if you can like merge the experience into that, is that what you're saying? If I, in short?
Well, it's when we're starting having an experience, we're starting with all of our own, like if our cognitive space is just all the stuff we've put in our mental garage, right? This is all the stuff we have, that if people have to abandon their garage and go into a completely different space with tools that they don't recognize, there's too much going on to then use those tools to come up with a new idea, like come up with, with the frame. But if you can focus on something that we generally all have, at least some aspects of these in our garage, and reshape them. But the trick is you can't just move them around. That's just changing seats on the Titanic. You still have to build something different from those materials, right? So that's the tricky piece, is if people can draw on their own experience, you'll get more value out of doing it, because everybody brought valuable experience into the room. But it's not just moving that experience around, right? My cat has decided to, she joins every meeting, but
create an experience.
She is definitely. What I'm hearing also is that you're basically very focused on listening, on what the outcomes that they really value are, and trying to kind of share the common ground. I think you're kind of what I understand by what you explained is that you listen to people and try to replay, especially the parts that are common, and kind of say, okay, these two, your experience, Kenny, of what is needed and what is the problem, and your experience there, and whoever else is in the room or the garage or whatever. And these are the bits that we're sharing, and it seems like we're going over there. That's the outcome, somewhere there. Is that, and you're kind of iterating on that until you find it? That's what I'm getting. Is that what you're talking about?
A little, yes, but yes, definitely. So if I wasn't doing that, nothing good would be happening for sure, right? Like, and this is where I give talks very different now than I did 20 years ago, because my role in that room feels very differently. And it's more in line with what you're saying. Like, we're here together to do a thing, as opposed to I'm presenting something, right? Like, that person has changed. Also, what I would add to that, though, is that my role, the expertise that I'm developing, it's interesting because we started talking about wisdom, things like this, that cognitive patterns are energetic patterns, right? We have an idea, a belief, something we value. When we think of something, our minds will go in a particular familiar direction. So, for example, working with teams going from a CRUD monolith to asynchronous and microservices, it's very challenging because our thinking is very tightly coupled. So when we build the microservices, like, we architect them to be tightly coupled. So it's listening, and it's facilitating and going and trying not to add friction. But there is definitely a very, I think, important nudging that you're energetically, you're looking for the places where this is going to go down the same path, right? Like, this will be the same thinking, that even though it seems like new thinking, we're going to end up in the same place. And the places where you can ask a different question or do a different thing. But that also requires a little bit of forethinking about what the change is. Like, if people are going in a particular direction and you're facilitating to nudge them in a different direction, if you have no idea where that direction is, then you can't do that, right? But at the same time, you don't know that you're just someone else in the room with a thought about what the right outcome is, right? And so if you're just going to bring them to your idea, you might as well just tell them your idea and tell them go do it. Like, that's the intellectually honest thing. And every once in a while, I am like, because I said so. We're going to do this because I said so. Every once in a very great while, but it's very, very rare. So it is a little bit like a flock of birds, where you have to be grounded enough in the space enough to be flying with the flock of birds while you're facilitating, right? If you're trying to marshal it, it won't work. And if you're trying to control it, it won't work. But also, if you turn off your brain and just flow with it to kind of go, and you're not actually adding a little tension where it should go, then, and sometimes that's exactly what you want to do. Sometimes in facilitation, you're just helping people articulate what's going on. That's great. I'm not against that at all. For me, it is more usual nowadays that we're facilitating towards an insight that we haven't had yet. And then, so it's looking for those opportunities to open a window differently. Might work, might not work. So it's both a science and an art, I guess. It's both listening and also an energetic interruption of pattern in some way that is helpful.
Yeah, I think that.
Except when it isn't.
Yeah, and I love that you're adding on the caveats, because I see them myself, and I'm sure that people listening will see them too. I think that's a beautiful place to close this story. Thank you very much, Diana, for joining us. Kenny, for being here, so we're here together. And well, that's it. Thank you very much. Bye bye.